I'm live. Just want to make sure everything's working here and make sure that we are in screen. So I am live, just so you know. And there's actually apparently 3 people watching already. I haven't even really officially started, so we'll do the intro here in a second. I just want to make sure everything was in screen and that with this first live on YouTube, we've moved everything over from Facebook Live to YouTube Live. It just makes it a little more flexible for us so we can do some other editing with the videos here that we can't necessarily do as easily on Facebook. So with that said, here in a minute, we're going to officially start. Just give me, we can start now. First of all, I want to say welcome to AquaLocate live from Texas. My name is Ervin Kraemer. I'm one of the founders of AquaLocate. And what we're going to talk about today is groundwaters, aquifers, well drilling, and the science behind finding water before you drill. One of the topics I want to discuss today, and by the way, if you have any questions, you have topics you want me to discuss, if I don't get to it today, I'll be happy to get to it at another time. Answer your questions anytime. Fire away. I'll do my best. Anyway, so one of the topics I want to talk about is how do you know how deep to drill as you're planning expenses? And in fact, I talked to a gentleman today from Idaho, and his first estimate from a drilling contractor was $100 a foot. And his estimate was $20,000. That means that the driller is saying that they're going to drill 200 feet. And he could certainly trust that if he wants to, but wisely, he did not do that. He's done a lot of exhaustive research. They're moving from Tennessee to Idaho, and he's been leaning forward, which I strongly recommend. One of the best things you could do is research. Now, research doesn't always answer all the questions, but that's a really good start. And anybody that's trying to spend their money wisely and make sure that they don't end up on the wrong side of a deep, expensive, non-productive well will do a lot of research. So in his case, he's fortunate. I think there's about a half a dozen wells in his area. And his wells, the wells are they hover around 150-ish feet. As a maximum drill depth. There's a couple shallower ones, but they're all kind of in that range. So it's pretty easy for him. There's not a big range on depths or yields. In fact, even though the yields on well logs aren't very accurate, even the yields on the well reports for his area, again, I think there's only 6. It's like 8 to 15 gallons a minute, and the depths are like 100 to 150 gallons a minute. So, 100 to 150 feet. So he's done the research. He kind of has an idea. He wisely chose to have an independent operator of our technology do some more exploration for him just to confirm the presence of water, confirm depth, and at least give him some minimum expected yields. So the first step you want to do when you're looking for how deep am I going to have to drill is do some research. If your area is if it's a fairly consistent depth range in the history and you have maybe half a dozen wells kind of in the area surrounding you, and they range from 150 to 225 feet, that's a fairly tight range. You can kind of at least high end the costs that you're going to end up dealing with, which is again, this guy's case was $100 a foot, which is really expensive. I believe that's probably for a finished well. So that includes casing, surface seal, drive shoe for the drilling, the pump, the pressure tank, things like that. That being said, I wouldn't recommend combining the equipment that goes into your well with the drilling part of the process. So my recommendation for this is always separate out the drilling and the finished part of the well with the pump and the other infrastructure that goes with the pump. And I can explain that either a little bit later or in a future video. So again, the first step for determining depth of your well is to do some research. We love to do that for people. People call us all the time. We provide them with some free research. And we're part of that research trying to assess the risk, but we also get a good idea of the depth variation. If you're in an area like where we are, where our office is and where we live, the problem with the depth variation here is it could be really broad. So it could be anywhere from 150 feet to 400, 500 feet, depending on how big your search area is. And that's a pretty big range. And it's really hard to know. It's hard to know where to stop drilling in that case. It's difficult to determine that. We can help with that. AquaLocate provides a service where we can help you determine max depth. If there's more than one aquifer, the system can tell you where each aquifer bottoms out, or the bottom of those aquifers are. But even in research, if you do enough research, you'll find that some areas they'll have, in like where we are at, we actually have two kind of main aquifers. We have an upper aquifer that, depending on where you're at in elevation, it'll be somewhere between 100 and maybe 10, 20 feet or so down to about 200 feet. And then there's a second aquifer that ranges from a bottom about 280, 290 feet all the way down to 500 feet. Again, it just depends on what part of the area you're in, how far north you are, how far south you, east, west, things like that. The thing that a lot of people don't know about, at least like in this area, is let's say that you think, oh, okay, I can get water at 200 feet if I drill to the right depth. Well, the problem in this area is the water in the upper part of the upper aquifer is actually not very good. And if you just did simple research and saw that people drilled a well to 200 feet and they got plenty of water, the driller estimated 8 or 9 gallons a minute, didn't indicate anything about water quality, which they're not obligated to do, and they don't typically test it on site, then you might think, oh, I only have to drill to 200 feet. Well, the problem in our area is that water is really not very good. It's very high in total dissolved solids, which is minerals. There's lots of minerals mixed in, and minerals, which becomes a problem for human consumption and just dealing with buildup in your faucets and other fixtures, is there's a lot of sodium in there, and that sodium can cause corrosion and other complications. Whereas the deeper aquifer, yes, it's more expensive to drill to, it actually has a much better water quality. So if the driller does everything right and they seal off that upper aquifer, which they're required to do, but they have a process where they can do it correctly, and they focus all the extraction from that deeper aquifer, at least again in this area, they're going to get plenty of water, and the water quality is much higher, and it produces more water for the most part in this area. So depth can be a little bit challenging. We can come and help with that. One of the other things you might want to look at, I've done some research in areas where the wells range from 150 feet all the way up to 400 or 500 feet. And at the surface, you might think, wow, that aquifer changes a lot. In many cases, that's not what actually is happening. In some of those areas, what happens is they'll drill to 150 feet and they might get a little bit of water, but it's not very much. And either the property owner's there saying, well, I think I need more water, and the driller's telling them, well, there's not much water here, we're not seeing a lot of return. What do you want us to do? Or maybe there's some deeper wells in the area that might produce water. And so through a series of processes, you're convinced to drill deeper, searching for water. Well, when you're paying a drilling contractor, let's say $100 a foot, to search for water, you're spending a lot of money. If you should have stopped at 100 feet, 150 feet and lived with 2 gallons a minute, and you end up drilling to 500 feet and you still only get 2 gallons a minute, you've spent an extra 350 feet of drilling. That's $35,000 at $100 a foot. That's a lot of money to spend with no benefit. We can help you with that, but also just some simple research. If you dive into the numbers, and if you, again, we can help you. There's other operators of our equipment that may be able to help you as well. And do that research. You cannot spend enough time researching this topic, because once the well is drilled, you get the bill. It doesn't matter how much water is produced. It doesn't matter if it meets your needs or doesn't meet your need. You're paying for it. And you might feel better when the driller says, well, we're going to give you a bit of a discount. We're not going to charge you for the full amount. We're only going to charge you for 400 feet instead of 450 feet. That might feel good in the short term, but you still have to drill another well. So you've paid for 400 feet of drilling, $40,000 at the $100 a foot rate, and you still got to do another one. And where do you stop drilling? Do you take a chance and drill to another 450 feet? again, we can help you with that. If you contact us, go to aqualocate.com. You can contact us and give us your address, or call us and give us your address at 800-251-2920. We would love to help you. We love helping people. We don't always need to provide you services. If we can just give you some ideas. I also have a pretty cool book that I published called Water Well Drilling, a Comprehensive Guide to Proper Construction. And this is a super useful tool. In fact, I got contacted by a client of ours who owns one of our systems in Honduras. He's also a drilling contractor there. And he sent me a message yesterday and said how thankful he was for the book, which was nice. It was unsolicited. It's very humbling for somebody that I don't talk to on a daily basis to send me that. And he actually asked me for a copy of it in Spanish so he could share it with some of his colleagues. So we've since translated the manuscript into Spanish, and it's now available on Amazon. So if you know anybody in Latin America that needs to know a little bit more about drilling before they start spending tons of money on drilling, that book can help you. It's just a 25 years of experience condensed into a fairly short, easy to read book. A lot of people that have helped us over the years, I've included their information in there, and some research from some industry magazines and things like that wrote articles about certain topics. I've included some of that information in the book because it's out there. Why not use it? One of the questions that some people ask me is, what should a landowner do before drilling a new well? So a landowner should do as much research as possible. If they're not sure where to start, give us a call. I'll tell you where to start. I'll tell you how to get to the websites to do the research. If you're not sure about the research you find, if you're not familiar with it, do the research. Call us back and say, hey, this is what I found. Does this sound right? We'll do some research for you. I did the gentleman in Idaho that's moving from Tennessee. He had already done a lot of his own research. Again, had some exploration done by an independent contractor up in Idaho. And then I still did some more research for him because I thought, why not? It's not going to hurt. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to do a little bit of research. It's worth the time. Again, if anybody has any questions about what we do or how we can help, or about well drilling in general, I would love to help you. And one of the other questions that we get frequently is, can a dry well, or probably a failed well, can it be restored? A lot of wells that go dry actually fail because of design problems, lack of development, any number of factors. And in those cases, when they stop producing water for those reasons, where it's just a design issue or a development issue, most of the time they can be redeveloped and brought back to life. It happens a lot in municipal wells, larger production, like public supply wells. Farm wells will get redeveloped over time. There's a process to do it. It's a little bit of it obviously costs money, but it is often less expensive, especially these days with the cost of drilling per foot going up seemingly by the month. It can be much more cost effective to redevelop the well, go back in and repair the damage that was caused by excessive use or overuse, and it can be restored to its previous glory, sometimes even better. I read an article about a rehabilitation program and a company that distributed a rehabilitation service. And there was an agricultural well that they were called to help on. And the well originally produced about 1,000 gallons a minute. And it had since reduced in production down to 300 gallons a minute. They went and applied their process for redevelopment and rehabilitation. And after about 2 days of this work that they completed, the well ended up producing 1,200 gallons a minute. So it was 200 gallons a minute more than its initial production rate. And obviously, 900 gallons a minute more than it had reduced to. So some wells can be rehabilitated. It's worth at least a discussion and a thought. Again, it could be a lot less expensive than drilling a new well. So one of the questions I get is, how can a well initially produce water or at least the driller says it's producing water, and then all of a sudden it fails. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. I actually shared this with somebody else the other day. I did some project in Olympia, and it was for a small development. I think all the lots were around 5 acres apiece. And they had a well drilled by a local drilling contractor, and the driller estimated the yield at 35 gallons a minute. They didn't do a pump test. The driller just did an airlift test, and they estimated 35 gallons a minute. So they built infrastructure around the thought that that well was going to produce well over 35,000 gallons a day, every day, to support this development. They were going to use it as a community well, and they were going to support the development with this 35,000 plus gallons a minute. In fact, I think it's like more like 40,000 or some odd gallons at 35 gallons a minute. Anyway, they built the infrastructure. They bought this 20 or 25,000 gallon storage tank and built the infrastructure around it, and they were going to distribute it through all these homes in this development. Really nice area, and they finally had a pump test done on the well, and unfortunately, the pump test showed it at only 8 gallons a minute. Well, did that well go from 35 to 8, or was there a mistake made on the initial assessment? The problem with most initial assessments on a current well is that, or on a new well, is that they're done very quickly, maybe 15 minutes, an hour, but they do it usually by blowing air into the bottom of the well with their drill stem in place. So the drill bit's all the way down to the bottom of the hole, and they blow air into it, and then that air lifts some of the water out, not all of it, lifts some of the water out. It comes out the discharge pipe, and they often look at the discharge pipe or put a bucket under the discharge pipe and then measure how many minutes it takes to fill that bucket. If it's a 5-gallon bucket and it takes half a minute to fill that bucket, then that's maybe 10 gallons a minute, right? Supposedly. Well, that's not really how that works, but that's their rough estimate, and that's really rarely accurate. Fortunately, in most cases, it's understated. So the estimate that the driller provides is often understated when they measure it that way. Nonetheless, it's still not accurate, which is one of the reasons why I said earlier that you really should separate your drilling contractor from your pump installation contractor. If you have your pump installation contractor do everything, they'll often do a full pump test on that. It would take 4-8 hours to do a pump test. There's a fee for that, but it's worth every penny, because then they can size the pump for your well and help you determine what size pump should be in there. Because in many cases, not always, this is not always the case, but in many cases, a drilling contractor will typically use what they call a standard size pump for a well. It doesn't matter if your well produces a gallon a minute or 30 gallons a minute. They're going to use a 12-gallon minute pump or a 5-gallon minute pump or a 10-gallon minute pump, whatever. And that's not the way it should be done. The pump really should be sized to, as closely as possible, match the sustainable production of the well. And that way you end up with fewer problems. Of course, there's other pieces to the process. The book that I mentioned earlier will describe that for you in much more detail. We do have a document that's a very short version. It's a 1-page document that covers the basic steps in this book. I would love to share that with you. If you message us and say, hey, can I get a copy of that document that you mentioned on this video? We'll send it to you. We don't have a problem with that. It doesn't cover all the bases, but it covers some basic stuff. And at least gives you some talking points that you can discuss with your driller. And that way you enter the process in an informed way. You don't just blindly accept the whatever is going on your property when you're not there. You can at least educate yourself a little bit and find out a little bit more about the drilling process, so you know what should be done. And then you can have these discussions with the drilling contractor. It will help you choose a drilling contractor, because it's a big decision. Again, some areas it's difficult. You'd be shocked at areas where you think there should be water, and somehow you end up with a non-productive well. Now, it could be non-productive for various reasons. We've discussed that in other videos. We'll discuss it again, probably over and over. We can help you with that. And if you're in an area where the water availability is a little bit sketchy, or you're not sure about it and you think you need services, let us do some risk analysis for you. We'd love to help you with that. We'd love to help you kind of pull that risk down as best we can. and help you find the right place to drill your next well. If you go to aqualocate.com, you can find out more about the services we provide, the equipment we provide. We provide equipment to independent operators all over the world. We're very fortunate to work with a lot of great people. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, or like it, and just tell us what we can do and what questions you have so we can answer them on the next video. Thanks for listening to me drone on endlessly. And I would love to talk to you guys again. And we'll talk to you next Tuesday, right? But we're going to be out of state. So we'll talk to you from a remote location somewhere else. All right. Take care. Have a great night. See you soon.